All right. How we doing? My name is Sal Conti at SC2DFW on Twitter. My colleague here, Derrik Klassen at QB Class on Twitter, here to you today to talk about some of the premier talents at the offensive tackle position in the 2015 NFL Draft. Derrik, how about a word?
Yeah, this is gonna be fun. We got 5 or so guys on deck. Um, let's go ahead and start with Collins.
Your internet. Lyle Collins?
Jack
Yep.
for a second.
Let's get right
Yeah.
into it.
Okay. Yeah, let's start off with Lyle Collins. I know a lot of people are concerned with how Lyle Collins is going to hold up out on the edge because he doesn't have super long arms, and people think maybe he's not a super quick mover. But I think the thing with guys like that is functional length, and me and you talked about this a little bit last night. Guys like Lyle Collins, he doesn't look super quick, but for as powerful as he is and as strong as he is, both in his upper and lower body, he crosses the threshold.
I agree.
With landmark, he's going to be able to punch a guy right in the chest and throw him out of the pocket. Or if someone tries moving back inside of him, he has this just incredible power to push guys back and even into his own guard if he has to. Lyle Collins is just an absolutely brutal player. Any sort of blitzing linebacker that's definitely going to have a lot less pounds on Collins is just going to get absolutely mauled. Even if it's, I know there's a couple plays in pass protection where he's moving a guy out across the edge and someone tries to come blitz inside and he just moves and just punches him right in the chest and, plays over for that blitzer. And that's why I like Collins. He's not the quickest guy, but if he can get close enough and if he can get his hand on you, there's, a 90% chance you're just done.
Yeah.
And his punch is just rude, and he did it, against even Dante Fowler, who a lot of people, he's this, big, strong defensive end. He absolutely murdered that entire Florida front. That was probably the best game I've seen of him. There were multiple plays where he just took out multiple blockers and gave Leonard Fournette, some hole that Optimus Prime could probably drive through. And that's why I love Lyle as a run defender or a run blocker. And then in pass protection, like I said, he's not the quickest guy, but he has the functional length to get where he needs to be, and as long as he gets his hand on you, he's got this destructive power to just move guys if he needs to.
Right. I absolutely agree. Um, as far as Collins' punch goes, I think he's easily the most brutal and enforcing offensive lineman in this class. As far as tackles go, some of the other guys like a Fisher or an Andrews Pete, even a Sedia boy, he may have issues handling those inside moves, but if you go back to Collins' game versus Georgia in 2013, first 30, 45 seconds of the cut-up, you'll just see a 5 or a wider 5 technique try and take an inside swim or inside rip move, and Collins just works so well with his hands. He can just pick you up and dump you and throw you on the ground so easily. Just really instinctive, really smart. When it comes to timing his punches. He's not a big brute with not a whole lot going on up here. He's very calculated. He's very cerebral in how he works. Get off in the run game is great. We were talking about this before we went live. I really like to look at those teams that produce offensive linemen like LSU and Stanford, and teams that line up in 22 personnel and 12 personnel and just say, hey, we're gonna take up this much of the field, but we're coming right after you, and they produce some guys that can really roll off the ball. I noticed in that same Georgia game and throughout some of his 2013 film, Collins struggled a little bit by catching up to the wide rush. I noticed that in his outside foot, his kick step foot, when he knew that there was a 5-step game, 7-step game going on behind him, and he knew he had to gain some ground, he would make some kind of false movement and a false step and step behind himself as opposed to getting back and getting width now, and getting depth now. Kind of similar to how you talk about a receiver kind of using false movement and wasting a little bit of time and getting upfield not soon enough. And it's not 2 or 3 seconds we're talking about. But if you're going against a Von Miller, you're going against a Cameron Wake, you're going against a Bruce Irvin, there's very little room for wasted movement unless you're an elite and very gifted athlete. And Collins is good. He's no schmuck. But in terms of movement skills, I wouldn't consider lateral agility and catch-up speed being one of his strengths. I think it's something he's good enough at and he can build on. But in terms of wasted movement in his pass set, he definitely could benefit from fixing those issues in his mechanics. And maybe it's something that's coached. It is possible that there is something that was coached to him at LSU that could get him to get farther vertical in his pass set more. But I know if he'll have trouble against any old edge rushers from Georgia, you're going to the NFL and they're tilting and all they're doing is forcing everything inside. You have to make sure you're getting to your landmarks. You have to make sure your hands are in the right spot. And definitely all of kinks and your technique like that have to be ironed out. You know what? I have heard some argument that he could be a better guard. I do think that could be just a lazy comparison because of how he plays the tackle position. I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He was outstanding. Just plays with so much power, and I know I might be harping on that, but it's something that compared to his peers, I don't think anybody else plays with that much strength and is able to control it and have his elbows inside and have his hands not too far outside the shoulder pad and tucked inside the armpit and is able to torque and move at the same time on the go and outside zone and just able to readjust. I know as we'll get into Andrews Pete, I think he may have some issues getting to the next level, but Collins he's getting there. I can see him progress from year to year from 2013, 2014, similar to how Greg Robinson did it. Just very, I think, becoming more and more fluid and picking up next-level defenders. I think the sky's the limit for him. I would feel very, very comfortable about a mid-first-round selection, and he's going to be very good. Again, couple chinks in the armor in pass game. Definitely needs to refine his technique, and no wasted movement is crucial in his game because he's not the fastest big guy. But yeah, I think he probably has the highest floor out of all the guys we're talking about today.
Yeah, I agree. Highest floor, and maybe a guy like Andrews Pete has a higher ceiling, but I mean, ceiling-wise, he's definitely up there too. And I think you're talking about maybe mid-first round. I think I really like him. I'm pretty comfortable taking him top 10. If I really need an offensive tackle, I'm willing to use the value on him.
Right. No, I totally agree. I think you're looking at a – hold on one second. There we go. I think if you're looking at a team like New York at 9, that could be an option.
Yeah.
They could be looking at a Brandon Scherf, which we'll go into later. But I definitely compare it to the field. Collins has enough traits flashed now, enough growth potential down the road, and just strung together, but whether it's a good combine or good pro day or a great Senior Bowl, he checks all the boxes per se. He just has everything that you look for in a first-round guy. We'll go into these other guys later on that, there's a lot of red flags, there's a lot of risks. Where in Collins, I'll feel very comfortable about taking him in the first round.
Yeah, for sure. And then let's move on to another guy who had some first-round hype, when he was originally getting talked about in Cedric Ogbuehi. And part of his hype might have just been because he was another Texas A&M tackle, and the last 2 Texas A&M tackles went top 6. So and then there was hype with him, moving to left tackle. He kind of struggled there. I'm not really a Cedric Ogbuehi fan. I don't think he's terrible, but he was definitely receiving more attention than he should have. I think he moves rather well. His quickness is good. I think he's a fluid player. His first step tends to be pretty impressive. I've always kind of thought he was a smart player. Got to his landmarks, got to his assignments when he needed to. But physically, he comes up short. I think, he's a catcher. He doesn't really have that mentality to where he wants to just hit the guy in front of you, and that's why I love Collins and even Robinson. I just love guys that are willing to go out and just put the other guy into the ground, and Boyke doesn't really have that. I know there's a meme going around that I think Sully likes to use a lot, where it's a Boyke and he has pillows on his hands, and I mean that reigns true for the most part. Like he's just
Fair.
not a very it is. I mean he's not an aggressive player, and even when he tries to punch, he's just not very strong. I don't think. And there's just so many plays, even in like pass protection, he'll go back and he'll try to catch guys. He doesn't want to punch, and the edge defender will just slap his arms away, and it's such an easy move for the rusher to do, because he's just a boy. He isn't trying to hit this guy and force him out of the pocket. He's trying to just stand in front of him, kind of, and that's not going to work in the NFL. It wasn't even working that well at the college level, especially when he was a left tackle. I don't think he's really a left tackle. Maybe you can get him, if you can get him to play more aggressively, he could be. And it's not necessarily, assignment-wise, the difference between right and left tackle for him. I just think, if you watch his left tackle tape versus his right tackle tape, he's so much more natural at right tackle. I feel like he played with a little more strength at right tackle, maybe just because he was more familiar with it.
I totally hear you there. My issue is, my issue with him moving to right tackle is, if I'm not mistaken, he tore his left ACL. And that left knee, that's where your power is coming from. That's where the point of all your redirecting is going. I mean, obviously your kick step foot is used to get back and gain leverage and gain vertical depth. But if you're going to play right tackle and you have a torn ligament in your left knee, and that's going to be really tough. And for a big dude like Said, who I think his game and all the pluses in his game really circled around mobility, being able to move. Really, I thought, had a great get off in the pass game. Active feet, very active feet. Again, issues with the hands, not really loving his upper body strength, not very physical. He played more like a roadblock instead of a road grader. But in terms of agility, I was really impressed, and that's why if you take a big guy has not really a great punch and prides himself on athletic prowess, and you throw in the fact that he has a torn knee, it'd be really, really tough to slot him in any earlier than a year and a half, 2 years. My projection for him is really dependent on, how fast can he heal? What's his recovery process looking like? And then when he's even at 100% to return to field drills, how soon can he add bulk to his upper body? How soon can he learn to keep his elbows inside his frame? Is he going to play more like an enforcer, or is he just going to play to make sure nobody gets onto him and make sure that nobody completely messes him up? I think he played all really passively, and he has the frame to do otherwise. I know we were talking about before, maybe a Smith on the Dallas Cowboys right now played like that at USC, but I think even Smith had more strength and more functional pop to his game, where he needed to find himself, and he needed great coaching. And now Callahan up in Dallas, one of the best to do it. That's what a boy he needs. He needs to heal, and he needs to have a great coach to help him find himself, because there's a lot of potential in there, and if his knee can heal up, he can move extremely well. A healthy Cedric Aboyhe, I'm not concerned about his movability at all, and that's not something I can say for everybody else. But as far as draft slot goes, obviously first 2 days I would imagine are way out of the picture. But again, if a team with good coaching can stash him, almost redshirt him for a couple years, I could see him being a very good swing tackle in years to come.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that value. The first round talk was absurd, especially after he had that injury, and then second round, I'm not comfortable at all with that either. I think you can justify taking him in the third round if you feel like you're very confident in your coaching staff, and that if you think his medicals check out well enough. Especially with the injury, though, I'm not sure if I'd take him in the third round, maybe the late third round if I already have a solid offensive line and I'm just trying to stash something away for the future, maybe 2 years down the road. But yeah, generally I'd be a lot more comfortable trying to take him early day 3. Um, yeah, I
Again, it really
just
depends on um,
your coaching staff and what's going to be around him and if he can heal.
right, absolutely. It really, all of this talk of draft slot is good and well, and we probably have an idea of
Mm.
who's going to go where and who fits best at certain spots, but it really all depends on offensive philosophy, who the coaches are, and who's on the depth chart. So that's definitely
Yeah.
something to keep in consideration. Let's transfer over now to another guy who's big and moves very light on his feet. What do you think about Oregon's Jake Fisher?
I like Jake Fisher a lot. He's my number 2 tackle right now. He's like you were saying, he's a really good mover, especially for his size. And I know he had a really impressive combine. Um, I think me and you have talked about this, before. He's sort of like those past A&M tackles, uh, where maybe I'm definitely a little concerned about that because he does give me some flashes of a Luke Jokel or Jake Matthews, but I think he neither of those two were all that aggressive, and he's not all that aggressive either. But I think his strength is good enough, from what I've seen, that he's going to be able to hold up in pass pro. And when he's getting aggressive in the run game, which he's shown that he can move guys out of the way. Not like a Lyle Collins, but he can certainly create the rushing lanes that he needs to. I think he plays low and uses his weight very well, and that's what makes him I think stronger than he may appear at times. It's just that he knows how to use his weight in his lower body. Um, I think he's a very good mover at the second level. He's going to be able to find that linebacker. He's going to be able to make that block down the field. If you ever see, it happens a lot at Oregon. These guys busting off big plays, and there's always an offensive lineman or two trying to run with him. That's going to be Fisher. And sometimes those key blocks for guys trying to chase your guy down are going to be able to win plays. And I think Fisher provides some value there. But at the same time, he definitely overextends a lot, and it's because his hand placement. I think he has the right technique, and he's locking up his elbows and he's trying to hit guys, but he's doing a lot of doing it too early, and that's what gets him to overextend, and that causes some problems. And then even though I think his punch technique is good, it's not all too powerful. I don't think he's not jolting defenders back like a Brandon Scherf or a Lyle Collins. He's not being able to jolt guys back and stop those speed rushers in their tracks. Even though I think he does a good job of mirroring them well, I don't think he's going to be able to wash them out as easily as he needs to right now. I think he can definitely add some bulk. Um, I just think he's such an impressive mover and already has good enough strength that he's going to be a very good tackle.
Right. No, I definitely hear you there. Fisher, I think, in the players we looked at in terms of projecting to a tackle position, by far the best mover in the class. Before I go further with him, because I know I have my differences with Jake Fisher, I will say that he was a converted tight end / DN type body in high school, Traverse City High School in Michigan. So there's obviously a lot of room to grow. Obviously, storied career at Oregon. If we're going to talk about like Marcus Mariota at the quarterback position at Oregon as really taking it to his own to exist in that system and thrive in that system and really be at the focal point of that system in terms of making decisions and just making things happen when the stuff hits the fan. I think Jake Fisher is the offensive line equivalent in terms of really being in that system and having his talents maximized by that system of heavy inside zone, outside zone, speed sweep, screen game, occasionally dart, which is, a tackle wrap scheme, or he'll wrap up to a second level player. And he just has a lot of room to grow, and that's why I really, there's definitely some upside with Jake Fisher. Moves really well, can legitimately move from hash to hash between the middle of the field to give you an idea to go chase down a corner or a force player or a safety, a linebacker, whatever. Some of the issues I have with him include what some may say his toughness or his strength in the run game. And while he does need to add pounds on, and he does need to just grow into his body as not really a full-time offensive lineman yet, formerly a tight end, I noticed that when he's asked to man block or when he's placed outside of a double team environment or he's placed to come up with power by himself, he does not play with great power angles in his legs. You'll see him lunge and miss often. You'll see him fall over, lose balance, and that's because he's relying on his hips up to make everything happen. And when you're not even that functionally strong compared to a Scherf or an Andrews Pete to begin with, you're going to lose your balance. You're going to have insane functional strength and great grip in your hands as well as elite strength in your pecs and all the way up here in order to sustain blocks with little power in your lower body. You block guys with your feet. That's the old saying. You don't block them with your hands. You block them with your feet. And if your feet aren't involved and you don't have great power angles with your knees, you're going to lose balance a lot. But the good news about that is that can be coached. And, strength can be added. Weight can be added. Technique can be coached on, but there's a lot of things in Fisher's game, including that I'd be really pretty iffy on starting him day one or throwing him in the fire in that first season. Hand placement in the run game ties back to that. It's really, it all comes down to technique and explosiveness and power. His agility is there. I'm not really buying the first round hype for him. I understand what people like. I get the agility. I love the fact that he can turn his hips, swivel his hips fully all the way, get from a first level to a second level defender with ease. I was very impressed by that. Plays with a nice hips up technique and pass protection, gets to his landmarks with using quick choppy steps, mirrors defenders very well. That's something he does better than a lot of offensive linemen in this class and last class, I believe. But he needs time. I think in terms of right now kind of value, he's someone who I definitely wouldn't look at in the first round. He's someone who I may look at in the middle end of round 2. He needs a lot of work, but in the same breath, I do understand why people like him, and he does have a lot of potential to grow.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's that. Typically I do go for the power types, but there's just something about Fisher, and I think we see his strength differently, but I think he crosses the threshold for now, and I think he moves so well. I do think maybe he does struggle a little bit early on, like a Jake Matthews did, but I know Jake Matthews improved a little bit over this season, and I was down on Jake Matthews, but he definitely proved that he could get a little bit stronger and sustain himself in pass protection a little bit better than I thought he would.
Right. One more thing before we move on. I can totally understand if, it all depends on the fit with me. I do agree that he's not weak per se, obviously. He's just not as strong as I would like. So if Jake Fisher lands in a team like Seattle or a Denver or Baltimore or a team that's going to really harp on zone blocking schemes, and there's a lot of tight end tackle combinations, tight end guard combinations, and favorable matchups occur because of that, and you have a great running back in the backfield and a Justin Forsett or whoever that can really mesh, the carpet matches the drapes in terms of the running back's movement really matches what's going on up front. If there's a perfect marriage like that, then issues like lackluster functional strength can be masked up and treated as if, it's not really a huge issue. But if you isolate him outside of the scheme, I see problems. Again, that really depends on where he goes to. He could end up being a great value pick depending on where he goes. But to a team like the San Francisco 49ers, assuming they keep their same run game principles, teams that like to pull guards and open gaps, and I don't think that'd be a great fit for him. So I want to wait and see on him. He moves very well, and his potential is going to really be capped or not based on where he goes.
That's fair. I mean, I like as much as I like him. I definitely don't want him going to a team that's going to force him to play in a phone booth all the time.
Right. Absolutely.
And then let's move to a guy who is going to dominate in a phone booth in Brandon Scherf.
Yep.
Scherf, I think, is a lot like me and you were talking about this earlier. He's a lot like edge, and he's shown that he could play on the edge. I think, he was definitely worse playing tackle after his injury. and maybe he recovers and can get back to that where he's quick enough to move out on the edge and can mirror well enough to where his brute strength can let him survive, kind of like Lyle Collins. Um, but I think kicking him inside is going to be a lot better for him. Mostly, he's so big. He's like 6'5", 315 pounds ish, and his swiftness getting to the second level is just absurd for someone his size. Like he gets there so fast and just takes out linebackers, and just completely moves them off of the play. And he's going to be such a great run blocker. His punch is just jolts people back, and then once he's got you, he kind of he swallows you, and he will throw you to the ground. He'll tackle you. He's going to find a way to take you out of the play. He keeps his legs driving once he gets onto you. And that's also what's going to make him a great run blocker, especially if you move him into guard. When you have other 300-plus pound guys that you need to move, the Sheriff is going to keep those legs moving. And if he can get a good enough jolt on you originally with his punch, he's just going to wash you out of the play.
Right.
And that's going to make him so valuable.
I agree. I definitely agree. Maybe not in terms of exact measurable to measurable, but in terms of that guy at tackle who looks good but could be better at guard. The player last year was Zach Martin, and for me, absolutely this player for this year is Brandon Scherf. We went from Jake Fisher, a guy who maybe has the functional strength to contribute at the next level. This dude could play tomorrow in the NFL, functionally strength-wise, if he wanted to. 6'5", 320 pounds, but it's not a lean 320. We were talking about this before. Some guys wear 6'5", 320 differently than a Brandon Scherf. Brandon Scherf looks like a big guard out there who's playing tackle because he has good feet, and he's not playing, say, a Cameron Wake, Von Miller every week. He's going against college football competition, and he can get away with that because he's a superior athlete on the edge. Can he play tackle at the next level? I mean, if there's an injury, sure. If you need him, I'm sure he could. But left guard is definitely where I would slot him at. Powerful hands. He's just so nicely, compactly built where it makes it easy for him to have power angles in his legs. A lot of pop in his upper body. Physical, mean, nasty drive blocker at the point of contact. Not really as fluid as Jake Fisher, but definitely can pull around on toss sweep schemes, screen schemes. Outside the hash to the boundary, knocking over corners and force players. Very useful piece in the run game. Quick ran, I have it right here. Ran a 5.05 40-yard dash, 1.78 10-yard split. Just a really explosive player who I think can contribute from day one and will absolutely be, I think, one of the league given a couple years. Oh, I forgot everything about pass pro, so I'm going to talk about that now. Projecting, I wanted to look at how he protected in the pass game, obviously, but I also wanted to take a look at mentally how his process will change from being the tackle to guard. A lot of people look at draft breakdown film, they look at coaches' film, and they look at a tackle and see how he operates on an island. It's just him and the D end, or it's him and a linebacker, him and a corner, him and a safety, whoever. It's just they like to isolate it and think of it as an island. Well, if you're playing guard, well, yeah, you're not going to have to deal with all the speedy edge guys and all the corner fire, will fire, field boundary blitzes, all that stuff. But you are going to have to know, okay, we got an even front with a 20 technique and a 30 technique, which is two inside linebackers. And I have to know if we're in a half-man slide or we're in a full zone slide or if we're in 5-step, 7-step, quick game protection, screen game, or whatever. I need to know my relationship with this guy next to me at tackle, my center right here, and which of these guys are we going to block. And I couldn't tell you the whole thing because I never play in the NFL, obviously. But I can tell you this, for as much athletic prowess as it's needed to man the edge, you need a lot of stuff up here, or at least enough up here, to maintain pass protect responsibilities. I know if you go to his film, I believe versus Wisconsin in 2014, he was playing tackle. Perfect example of what I'm talking about. he had a Will linebacker, a Sam linebacker coming off the edge, and he had to pass off the 5 technique to his guard, and he picked up the backer and washed him off, but his guard was still peeking inside, looking for inside help or something, I'm not sure, and there goes the defensive end making the sack in the backfield. So it's just these little things. Zach Martin did a great job with it because he had experience at both positions. It's not a huge mental learning curve. It's just something I want to keep in mind. That moving from tackle to guard does require a new mental skill set, a new mental checklist. As far as athleticism goes, he has the feet to do it. He definitely has the strength in his upper body, the strength in his hands to hold off big, strong 2 eyes, 3 techniques. And like I said before, will definitely, I think, be an impact player like a Zach Martin or a Joel Bitonio in the NFL at a guard spot.
Yeah, I totally agree. And with him transitioning to guard, I know it's definitely different assignments that he's going to be asked to do. But I think when you look at him in the run game, going to the second level, he has no hesitation as to where his guy's supposed to be. He knows exactly where he needs to be. He knows where that linebacker's supposed to be, and he's going to hit him and take him out of the play. So
Right.
I think he's shown what he can at tackle to prove that he should be able to move to guard, if that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely. Spot on with that. He's a great player. He's going to be a great player.
Mm-hmm.
So staying on the topic of guys that can push you around and not feel bad about it, probably my most intriguing player in this set of guys we're looking at, and that's Andrews Pete, the big tackle from Stanford. What are some things you like and don't like about Pete's game?
Things I do like about Pete, well, for one, he's massive, and we were talking about, guys wear weight differently. He's 310 plus, but he's, longer, leaner than a guy like Brandon Scherf. So he wears his weight differently. I think he's very athletic. His get off on the line is very good, both in pass protection and as a run blocker. He has a lot of strength, both in his upper and his lower body. My problem with his strength is that, I don't know if it's that he doesn't want to use it or that he doesn't know how to use it, but I definitely feel like there's a lot of instances where he doesn't quite know what he's doing with his hands to, start off and initiate that contact. I think there's a lot of times where he's just not punching like he should, especially in pass protection. And I don't think he's like a Cedric Ogbuehi. Like I don't think it's nearly as big of an issue for him as it is for like a Cedric Ogbuehi. But I would definitely like to see a little better initial demeanor out of Pete, and I think that would definitely maximize who he is as an athlete. Because right now, I think sometimes he's kind of a catcher in pass protection, and that scares me a little bit. But I do definitely think he has that quickness and length and strength to make up for that enough. Especially if you can get him to just be a little bit more aggressive. I mean, he doesn't even have to necessarily jolt defenders back on every play. I just want to see him, get his hands in there a little bit quicker as opposed to kind of letting plays come to him sometimes. And that doesn't reign true all the time. He's kind of an inconsistent player. I think it's just something I want to see more often from him.
That's a good note. I do agree with that. What I like about Pete, obviously, is not just strength and punch, but his ability to make his mistakes and his faults and his technique look so minimal because he's so strong. I think, I was talking to Duke Mayweather on Twitter about this, and I just think the sky's the limit for this kid. Big, strong, 6'7", 313 pounds, huge mauling tackle again, played in that downhill offense where, it wasn't very pretty. It was just him and the guy in front of him, and whoever got knocked off the ball lost, and it was just nitty-gritty. I love watching football like that because it really gets to show you what a guy's get-off is like, what a guy's his attitude is like. I mean, if you're going to start for the Stanford Cardinal, you better have an edge, and Pete absolutely does. The one thing that worries me about his game, which really adds that boom or bust factor to his evaluation, is his pass set demeanor as a whole. And I believe this can be changed by not necessarily losing weight, but kind of changing where the weight is and his body composition. Being able to move his feet, being able, if you look at him, he looks a little weird to me. His weight is really not proportioned the way your run-of-the-mill left tackle is, and I think that really inhibits him from being able to get to his landmarks. We were talking about this earlier. His game this past season against, I'm not even going to say his first name, but his last name's Kakaha on Washington. Really had some issues getting beat on the first step versus wide 6, 7, wide 5 techniques. And there were some times where he would get beat on his first step. He would cheat his hips to the sideline, which is traditionally a no-no, but as soon as he gets his hand inside of you, all he has to do is hold on, and you're not going anywhere. So that strength is definitely a plus in the pass game. It'll allow him to be functionally able to play in the NFL. He'll still have his mistakes, but the fact that he's that strong it's kind of like, all right, well, I'm strong enough to mask up my mistakes, but in practice, and I'm watching film, and game by game, and season by season, I'm slowly improving my body composition. I'm slowly becoming a better athlete. And he's never going to be a Jake Fisher in terms of movability, but if he can be a good mover instead of a below-average mover, then he has a chance to be really good because he has everything you look for in the run game. Excellent frame, long arms, huge hands, drives his feet at the first level. I don't see him having any issues with bigger guys. One thing that did catch my eye was his ability to, catch my eye in a negative way, was his inability to react to shooting linebackers. A little bit slow doing that, but again, that could be drawn back to his issue in pass pro, where it all comes down to his body composition and core strength and footwork and agility. Those come hand in hand. But more than that, I think it's just seeing it for him where, yes, you have to move this down lineman. He's going to make the tackle for a loss if you don't block him. But more than that, what I liked about Jake Fisher was his ability to flip his hips and put himself in a position to win a block. Turning a defender to the sideline, opening up the crease for the back right behind him. Pete needs to improve his ability to do that. I don't think he's a great blocker in terms of manipulating second-level defenders and forcing them to be wrong so the back can make his decision off of you. He has a knowledge of stunts and nickel blitzes that impresses me. He may not have great agility, but you'll see when he played Washington, when he played Notre Dame, he'll have a slanter in front of him, executes it perfectly, passes him off, but not without a shove here and there, not without a bump, and just before it's too late, coming off for that looper. Smart kid, plays with strength, uses his hands to his advantage. If he can fix his issues in pass pro, and if he can iron out his questions with his body and just how he's shaped, he could easily be a top 10, top 15 tackle in the league. But if this is a reoccurring issue, I'm not saying he'll be bad, but there's definitely going to be a lot of potential left untapped otherwise.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I mean, he's definitely he's kind of a physical freak. And like you were saying, if he can just make these minor improvements and starting to manipulate guys a little bit better and just start to maximize himself, by year 3, he should be a really, really good tackle in the NFL, and I think he can do that. I think he's someone I want to see a little bit more of before I make like a definitive round grade per se. But from what I've seen now, I think early second, the second round range makes a lot of sense. Even if he's going to be a little bit of a project, I think he shows these physical tools, like you were saying, to kind of make up for mistakes. If he can just improve on things that he's hiding, like you were talking about, and just kind of slowly, progressively get into that, which I think he can because he came out early. He's a younger guy, so he could definitely do that. I think there's definitely a lot of potential here for Pete.
Right, absolutely. The future is bright for this kid. Just a total package of frame, intelligence, strength, and growth development potential. He definitely has it all. So I believe, were those all the ones we were going over today? I believe that was it.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to open the floor to you now. I know you might have had questions or maybe there's a pressing conversational topic that needs to be started. So I'm leaving that up to you. Is there anything that you have for me in that regard in terms of offensive line play?
Um, I'll ask you about a hand a hand placement thing, and it was something I've noticed. A lot of people have noticed with Eric Flowers. Is
Okay.
he every time he initiates, I don't know how much you've seen of Eric Flowers, but he really gets his elbows out really wide and tries to kind of swarm back in, and I feel like that's really minimizing his power, and I want to hear your take on um, you know how important that is and how fixable that is.
Right. I haven't seen much of Flowers, and that's probably in that he's probably in somewhere in the middle of the next tier of guys that we're going to look at.
Mhm.
Um, because from what I understand, he's athletic, he's got great frame, and if people look at Duke Johnson's tape enough, I'm guessing Flowers is going to flash here or there.
Mhm.
Um, it is coachable in terms of elbows outside the frame, but I don't
Mhm.
care if you're, 6'6", 330, or if you're 6', 185, like I was in high school playing ball. If you don't have your elbows inside your frame, you're leaving a lot of power at the door. Um,
Mhm.
I'm Flowers is a big kid. I'm not sure exactly how functionally strong he is, but you don't punch. If you were going to punch someone, well, I hope not, or something, you're not going to punch them with your elbows. Like this is 1930s Pee Wee football technique right here. This is where you get your power from, so you can jolt or lift or strike with the inside of your hands with your thumbs up.
Mhm.
That's a huge issue. I actually, now that I'm talking about this, I remember Matt Miller saying something on Twitter along the lines of, um, uh, Eric Flowers from Miami, ducking his head and run block. Is that something that's taught by college coaches? And my answer is, I hope not, because if so, they should be fired, and I'm available in the fall if you need me. Um, ducking your head is very bad because that can lead to an
Mhm.
easy slap away the hands, go make the play in the backfield. Or
Mhm.
it can lead to even worse, running head first with your head down into a blitzing, stunting, or filling linebacker. You're going to get hurt. Um,
Mhm.
but how about this? Let me think about this for a second. Is there any occasion that you think he does this? Like, is it only versus immediate pressure, or is it only in the run game, or is it only in certain environments? Is it more of a reactionary thing, or is this just a hitch in his game that he does?
I feel like it's definitely kind of more of a reactionary thing, especially with speed rushers. I think to some extent he always doesn't have his elbows as tight as he needs to, but I think especially if someone's getting around the edge a little too quick, he definitely opens up really wide.
Right.
Like I know his game versus Virginia and Eli Harold. Eli Harold just destroyed him,
Really?
moving inside outside just because when he saw speed, he kind of panicked and he couldn't. He's not the greatest mover either, and he couldn't, get to the guy and punch him well enough, and that's, kind of because he's opening himself up and not getting enough power when he does get a hand on Harold, and Harold was just able to abuse him all game.
Yeah. When you were talking about his hands before, I assumed you were more talking about the run game because
Mm-hmm.
the pass game kind of has its own separate answer to it. If you're in
Mm-hmm.
the pass game, I won't be a stickler of your hands being way inside here. If there's gonna come a time and a place where you missed by a step and you're a half second slow and you got to do what you got to do to get your hands on the defender. With that being said, I'm never going to advocate for ducking your head because you can't block what you can't see. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, um, pass pro, it's really hard to see from an up top angle. But when it comes to pass protection, every little part of your body has to be in at least a certain spectrum of an area in order for your demeanor to be sound. So
Mm-hmm.
even if I'm a left tackle and I'm pass setting, and let's say the scheme I'm in calls for me to vertical set for 4 steps. Okay, we're not going on an angle, we're not quick setting, we're not cutting, we're just getting back for 4 kick steps. Um, it's important. Watch for Flowers' head. Okay, is it tilted inside? Is it tilted outside? Is it up? Is it down? Is it left? Is it right? Because wherever your head looks or wherever your eyes are tilted towards, that's where your body wants to go. So if a
Mm-hmm.
player if a player's oversetting, for example, Let's say he's getting way too much weight on his kick step foot. He's got way too much reliance on his outside hand. I know these are weird traits to put together, but it's just an example. Watch his face mask. If his head's tilted too far back, that's going to take his chest with him. That's going to take his back with him. Everything is going to go to where his head's facing. Whereas the correct technique is to kind of almost tilt your chin underneath you and keep your eyes looking at the edge rusher coming at you. You're not directly looking at it. Because what does my head do? As soon as I look outside, my hips open up. And as soon as my hips open up at the sideline, that's a two-way go for the defender. Exactly. It's a two-way go.
And that definitely happened with Flowers. I remember a couple times, Harold would get a good first step outside, and Flowers would kind of turn himself too quick, and Harold would just come back inside and, at least hit the quarterback.
Obviously, ducking your head versus an edge rusher or in any facet of football ever is a bad idea. But it's mostly, I would focus on his head placement before contact. I would focus on his hat placement off the snap, even if you have to wait 3 seconds until contact is made. Because really, every little detail counts in pass pro. And it's also important more on the feet than the hands and the upper body. It's important to know, just like we were discussing this earlier, there are different blocking schemes in the run game, for example. There's zone schemes, inside zone, tight zone, wide zone, there's screen, there's gap schemes where you got pullers and double teams and single blocks and whatever. Well, in the pass game, it's important to know that, you're not looking to see, okay, is this guy taking the same pass set every time? Is it consistent? Because A, there are certain plays that require different paths, and B, it could be a coaching point where it's something that was instilled in the program. Some plays I want my player taking a vertical set, and others I want him setting on a 45 degree. Other times I want him taking a quick set, and some are more apparent than others. But in most cases, I've learned that just a single tilt of the chin, and if you're looking on a TV broadcast angle, this and this are very easy to pass over, and then you can end up attributing it to bad feet or bad hands, or a lack of intelligence and congruence and aptitude to play within the system. But in reality, all we're talking about is this. Just a little tilt of the chin. Everything matters, offensive line play, in terms of technicalities. As far as Flowers goes, I'll have to look into him more, but if he's a kid that can move, and he's a kid with athletic prowess, would you say he's more or less athletic than, a Seantrell Henderson?
He's not Seantrell Henderson.
No?
No.
Well, still, even if he does have some athletic prowess that can be maximized, I'm sure he had a decent year blocking for Duke. The whole head bobbing thing going like this, I would definitely focus on his head placement mid-pass set, and I would definitely look at situationals and when he's doing it and why he's doing it, and he must be doing it to compensate for a lack of hand usage and kind of jumping the gun. And there's a how do I say this? There's an idea in offensive line play that you have to get to him before he gets to you. Well, what he wants is behind you, and he's going to have to go through you to get it. So be patient. I like to see a good pop in the run and the pass game with your hands, and I like to see aggressiveness. But at the same time, don't fight a battle you're not going to win. Don't try and run block a guy that's edge rushing you. Don't try and out physical a guy that's edge rushing you. I'm all for guys with great punch, and I'm all for guys that use their hands aggressively. And I do knock guys that don't showcase that, like Cedric Ogbuehi. But at the same time, what I like about Ogbuehi is that while healthy, he was great at mirroring defenders laterally. And while he didn't have great hand usage, what he did do was, on a more so than not basis, keep a good relationship between himself and the quarterback and keep a good inside eye to inside eye distance between him and the defender. So, I mean, it's tough. There's a lot of different variables you can look at, but all in all, it's really focused on the little things and then play the game of dominoes, because eventually that one little tilt of the chin will lead to all those massive hand misplacement issues and will really connect you to how a player can develop and grow and maybe have a good long pro career. So that's my take on it.
I mean, the head placement, other than the obvious ducking of the head, was something I never really even thought about. And like you were saying, maybe it is a little hard to distinguish on TV angles, but I
Right.
do feel like there's still um, a good amount you can still see from TV angles, especially since a lot of these, cut ups, or if you're watching a full game, there's obviously going to be some other angles that they display on certain plays. If there's a sack, sometimes they'll go, behind the quarterback, or show all 22 or something like that. So,
Right.
and you
I would
can use
definitely look for
those
the Senior
instances
Bowl.
to see
You
some.
know,
Yeah,
I'm pretty
that
sure.
too.
I'm pretty sure Flowers. They have one-on-ones broadcasted where you can
Hmm.
really look at. That's where the money's made. You have your team sessions, you have your games, but I want to look at. Amongst others, how a player operates when his assignment is simple. It's you, and it's the
Hmm.
guy in front of you, and you have to execute this assignment. And I want to see every little technicality in his game, and that's how
Hmm.
you iron it all out. So I think I'm definitely going to take a look at that, and I encourage anyone who wants to look at offensive line prospects to check out those one-on-one drills for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the head placement was really something I never thought about before, and going forward, that's definitely something I'm going to try to take much more notice on.
Absolutely, and again, it's just a little part of their game. It's not
Hmm.
something I'm not going to place head placement over feet agility, strength, build, whatever. But if you're finding you're scratching your head, you don't know why certain things are happening. It's a little trick of the trade to offensive linemen that little things like head placement and angle of the feet, and even if you're in your pass set, snapping your elbow off the ground, snapping your wrist off the ground, getting that fraction of a second head start that can
Hmm.
really make the whole process smoother. So it's really an art that, if you really delve into it and learn to appreciate, it's a cool thing because now I can, use these tools to help project players down the line. But I'll
Yeah.
stop rambling because I've said the same thing about 50 or 60 times now. So
No, you're good. I mean, that was definitely a learning experience for me.
no,
I think
absolutely. I'm still
that's
learning
really
too.
the only. Yeah, I mean, you know a lot more about offensive line than I do. I can definitely say that. I think that was the only question I really have right
Yeah,
now about offensive linemen. I'm sure I'll have another one when we get to guards and centers and all that.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I think this first well, I think this first session of hashtag Trench Talk 2015 was a success.
Mhm.
Um, Going further, I believe Derek and I will be covering guards and centers.
Mhm.
Maybe if we have time leading up, we'll cover some more tackles, guards, centers, whatever. But
Mhm.
again, if you want to talk ball about anything, offense, defense, special teams, linebackers, quarterbacks, water boys, cheerleaders, at SC2DFW, talk to me on Twitter, and you want to have a really intelligent conversation and don't know who the Ravens are going to take in the 6th round, at QB class, you know,
Mhm.
guys legit, both two guys trying to get the good word out, just want to talk some ball and learn every day. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Pretty new experience for me personally, and I can't wait to get this train rolling in the future. So thank you very much for watching, and Derek, any last words?
Just like you were saying, thank you, um, and we'll catch you guys with the next episodes in a few coming weeks.
All right, ladies, gents, don't forget to tip your waitress. Have a good one.